Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
Hey, thank you for that introduction. She's incredible. I was laughing because I kept hitting the stop button. I was like, why is this not going? Oh, because you need to hit the record button, Bob. You know, sometimes I told you I do weird things with technology sometimes, and then I get panicked. I get panicked because then I don't know what I did. Because I do little things like that make no sense. And then when I do something serious and it's wrong, they're like, well, what did you do? And I think, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Anyways, enough with me. I did think the other day, now you would have to be a faithful listener to the epic narrative and probably have a really good memory because I don't even remember when I talked about it. I want to say it was season 1, but it may have been season 2 where I was talking about technology. I was talking about how there's this one unread Gmail and I can't find it. And it's still true. I'm one of those guys, I mean, I am a guy, but I'm one of those people who I can't have unread messages. I have to do something with them. I trash a lot of them, granted. A lot of promotions, a lot of social stuff, just trash, whatever. Mark all read. Just as long as there's not a notification that I have an unread message. That part bothers me. And I've had one unread message for years. And I have, at times, gotten obsessive about scrolling through everything. And I've clicked, yes, I know. I've clicked the button that says, you know, show me only the unread message. And nothing happens. It doesn't show me a thing. I don't know. Yes, I've restarted. Yes, I've gotten a new computer. Yes, I've changed my password. Yes. Doesn't matter. That one is there somewhere in the tens of thousands of emails that I've had over the years. It's there somewhere unread. And I bet you it's trash. Like it's probably a Home Depot advertisement from, how long have I had that email? 10 years ago? Like I don't know. But it still bothers me. Not like enough that like I get irritated every morning, but like when I open up my phone and there it is, 1. Oh, that actually means 0 because I don't know where it is. And I can't believe that it does exist anymore because I don't know. But anyways, you might have remembered that I brought that up years ago on the Epic Narrative, and I just want you to know it's still there. It's still there. Crazy but true. Still there. All right. We still got at least this episode and probably another one to get out of numbers. So we're numbers 28. Now 28 and 29 are really about offerings, additional offerings, nuances added to offerings and festivals that were already reported on. You kind of look at these few chapters and pretty much the entire book of Deuteronomy as Moses knowing my time here is almost done. And I think that there's a lot of, not a lot. I think that Moses sits back and goes, all right, there's things here that I've observed now for a number of years of the offerings that are given. And I think that, you know, we could use a few more things to help people focus on God, for, you know, to help them understand that he's always available and that he should always be interacted with. But people don't understand that. They get distracted by pretty women from another country. They get distracted by the lack of food. They get distracted by what seems to be a lack of water. They get distracted by the taste of the food. Like, so I think Moses has a hand in these additions. I just do. Otherwise, I think they'd already be covered somewhere in Exodus, in Leviticus. But he adds these things, and that's fine. I don't think God opposes that kind of stuff. I mean, we've had those kind of dialogues before. I think leaders, they look around, they're like, all right, I hear from the Lord, and I'm going to combine it with things I think the people need to know, or I'm going to implement it in a way that I think the people would do best with, because I think God gives people freedom to do that. And the Lord might have said, "Listen, I'm all done with sacrifices. I don't need any more. I don't need these actually, but I think we got enough." And Moses is observing everything, and he goes, "I'd like to add a couple things." And the Lord trusts him with that. It's scary to think that the Lord trusts us with things. That when he gives us that kind of authority, he trusts us with that authority. And we get to make that call. So Moses adds to the burden of offerings. You have to remember, as far as I'm concerned, the Lord wanted to end offerings. I think Moses could have went the other direction and said, "You know what? I think all of this has people feeling burdened by making sure they get it right. I think we need to alleviate some of these things. Maybe we need to add more celebrations so that we have more fun together." I don't know. I mean, they got a lot of celebrations. And they got a few more mentioned in these chapters, 28 and 29. But God doesn't take your freedom of authority away, like I said, just because you got it wrong. He likes you. He knows his goodness is going to override and always be available. Not override, like that means he'd take away your authority. I mean, it's going to always be there. And people will experience it. So I think in those chapters, and you can read them, they're filled with details. But oftentimes, even let me put it this way. I think oftentimes leaders are scared to admit that they were involved in something like this. I think leaders want you to believe that they removed themselves from any influence on the word of the Lord, on the revelation of God, on their interpretation and translation and application of the Bible. They want you to sit there and believe that everything they're saying is God-breathed. Now, they might not say it, but they want you to believe it, because that means you're not going to push back against it. It means you will comply, or you are in jeopardy of breaking some principle of God. And that's where we get into some of the addiction of a hierarchical leadership paradigm that so many churches and ministries have, and so many have preached and pushed for so many years. And I think it's a dangerous complex. I think we were designed to have leadership by committee, leadership by relationship, leadership by family. And I know it means, well, we don't get anything done. The ministry would never be this big. And I think, yeah, I know. I kind of think that was the point. Not that big is bad, but it should be rare. It shouldn't be classes you take in seminary and a notebook that you buy from a consulting agency for $10,000 on how to grow your church from 100 to 100,000, and it works. And then you say, well, those are principles of God. No, those are business principles that'll distract you from God. And so will offerings that just get more numerous, more detailed. It eventually just gets in the way of your relationship with God. And we see that Israel struggles with that for years to come, and I'm sure it'll be a theme that we bring up for years to come, because the epic narrative is a long way from running out of material, even as fast as we're rolling through numbers. So in chapter 30, yes, we just covered 2 chapters. In chapter 30, it says, Moses said to the heads of the tribe of Israel, this is what the Lord commands. When a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything he said. When a young woman still living with her father takes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge, but says nothing to her, then all her vows and pledge by which she has obligated herself will stand. But if the father forbids her when he hears about it, none of the vows of the pledges she obligated herself with will stand. The Lord will release her because her father has forbidden her. Then it continues. I'll go through that. But vows and oaths are 2 different things. And honestly, there's no real English word that fits what's going on here. A vow is a very strong personal commitment. To break it was punishable by the courts. It's not a behavior, right? It's like a prohibition that lasts at least 30 days. So a vow would be something like, I vow not to eat an apple for 30 days. I'm not going to eat an apple for 30 days. I vow to not eat. I vow. Okay, well, now the apple, in essence, becomes a forbidden fruit for you. And if you eat it, then you can be exposed for that. That's what judgment means, right? But the courts will lay this out. You had a prohibitive behavior, a prohibition for 30 days. You broke that. Now, an oath, if you make an oath that says, listen, I make an oath not to eat an apple for 30 days, it doesn't make the apple a forbidden fruit. It just makes your act of eating it a forbidden action. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's why it's hard to explain in English. And then it goes on, right? So basically, anyone from 6 months old to puberty, as a female, your vows are subject to a fatherly review. Well, actually anyone, sorry, male or female. And he has 24 hours after he hears it to either tell you you can or cannot do it. And if he doesn't say anything, then you are obligated to follow through on it. Now, if you're a woman and you get engaged, and the father and your future husband then have to come together and discuss it. And if they reject or accept it, then the vow or oath will be either accepted or rejected based on their interactions. And once you're married, a wife can make a vow or an oath, but only the husband can only object to vows that would cause the woman discomfort during intimacy or cause harm to the marriage relationship. But the husband only has until sundown and to make to let that be known. And if not, then he has to bring it to the courts, to one of the judges, to evaluate what's going on and decide whether or not it's hurtful to the woman or physically, or hurtful to the relationship between the husband and wife. So something like that might be like if let's say I don't know, somebody says, I vow that I'm not gonna eat or drink for 60 days. Well, the husband or the fiance or whatever could say, no. Like you will die. Like you can't not eat or drink for 60 days. for 2 months. No, can't do it. And even though the passion and intensity of the vow may be true, the reality of it is it'll kill you. So you're not allowed to do it. Now you can make an adjustment and say, okay, I want to fast from food and water for 30 days. Well, food, yes. Water, no. No, that'll cause massive troubles. So no. And you can work your way around. That wasn't like fasting was a new thing or an exclusive thing to the Hebrew culture. It was worldwide. People did it all the time for all kinds of aesthetic reasons and spiritual reasons and physical reasons. There was all kinds of reasons to fast. So again, just something that somebody might do. But if they made a vow, it means it basically becomes it almost has a spiritual element to it. It makes something spiritually forbidden for you to do. And an oath just means you are physically forbidden to do it. If somebody has, let's say, a miscarriage, right? The woman might say, I want to vow basically. Now you have to remember you already have rules that are laid out, I believe, in Leviticus about all this that involved at least, I think, 30 days of recovery and another 30 days of purification. So there was a break between activities of the husband and wife, but she might vow to do more. And the husband might say, okay, that's reasonable. But if she makes something like, a vow to say, or an oath to say, I'm never having sexual relations again, the husband could say, no, that's not going to be helpful to our relationship. As a husband and wife, that sort of activity needs to take place eventually again. So let's talk about this. And if he doesn't want to tell her no, he can wait until after sundown. If he's a schmuck and he doesn't have the guts to talk to her, he could wait till after sundown and then say, we'll take this to the judge in the morning and let them decide. So anyways, that's the stuff going on between the vows and the oaths. And I'm sure that it had a lot of ramifications in their culture as conversations would take place all throughout their movements, not only here in the wilderness, but as they were moving into the promised land, as the tribes, after the promised land was taken. Now, granted, they wanted to take it militarily, so eventually they would know that they owned the land. But as the tribes spread out, they would want to make sure everybody was consistent with these sort of things. And again, maybe you make a vow while you're battling. I vow to never go to battle. Well, a father might want to weigh in on that. Or, you could end up in a very precarious position with the government of your nation. Oh, anyways, chapter 31. Moses goes to battle, right? So vengeance on the Midianite. Take vengeance on the Midianites for the Israelites. After that, you will be gathered to your people. God says, hey, it's just so you know, it's getting to be close to the end. You're going to be gathered to your people. You're not going to live forever, Moses. You're not going into the promised land. So maybe in the back of Moses' mind, he wanted to get back at the Midianites for their role in seducing the nation. Because he might have felt very personally betrayed by the leadership of the Midianites for not even coming to him and talking to him, for not making some sort of contractual arrangement to say, listen, we will not come into your lands, we will not take over your properties. Like there was nothing. He probably felt very personally attacked by them, and maybe even got accused by some of the tribal leaders of Israel of not doing all he could to avoid this sort of thing. So Moses sends them into battle, 1,000 from each tribe, along with the high priest, who took articles from the sanctuary and trumpets for signaling back and forth. And they fought against Midian, and they killed every man. And they killed all the kings, the 5 kings. And they captured Midianite women and children and took all the Midianite herds and flocks and goods and plunders. And they burned all the towns that the Midianites had settled in, and as well as their camps. And they took all the plunder and spoil, and including the people and animals. And they brought all the captives and spoils to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and the Israelite assembly of their camp on their plains of Moab. And Moses was, and they went out the outside. Moses was angry with the officers of the army and commanders of the thousands and the hundreds who returned from battle. How have you allowed all the women to live? They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed Israel to be unfaithful to the Lord. Now kill all the boys. Kill every woman who slept with a man, but save for yourself any girl who has never slept with a man. And then, by the way, you need to purify yourselves. That'll take 7 days, and burn this and wash that and soak that, and then give all the gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, and lead, and anything else that can withstand fire must be put through the fire to be cleaned. But it also must be purified with the water of cleansing. And whatever cannot withstand the fire must be put through the water. On the 7th day, wash your clothes, and then you will be clean. And then you can come back into camp. Again, I don't see this as the voice of the Lord. I think Moses was like, all right, my days are coming to an end. I think I want to clean up some messes here. It reminds me a little bit of what David did on his deathbed. Remember, he told Solomon, hey, go kill Joab. I could never do it. Go kill this, Ahmed, or somebody who had cursed him on the way out of Jerusalem when he was running from Absalom. He was like, all right, I promised I wouldn't kill him, but you need to kill him. I want you to wipe this guy out. Like, they kind of get to the end of their life, and then it's like, there's a few things I'd like to take care of. So I don't think the Lord gave him a plan to wipe out a nation. Remember, God's plan was always, you will annihilate the nations with my kingdom, to the point that their culture becomes the culture of heaven, and no one remembers what their old culture was like anymore. So Moses, right, kind of knew he was coming to the end. He moves forward with the plan. The victory was won, but Moses evidently wanted more. I think, again, this sounds very like somebody who has issues, who has been personally attacked and they're operating out of that hurt. And so the men show up from battle, and they've got these women and children with them. And Moses freaks out. He's like, what are you doing? Why are the women here? You should have killed them all. What are you thinking? These are the women who followed Balaam's advice and subtly destroyed 24,000 of our men because they made them all kiss an idol and eat meat sacrificed to idols. So then he tells them, kill all the women and all the boys, because I don't want them growing up to be to do battle against us. I don't know, man. It just, to me, that doesn't sound like God. It does sound like a lot of God's leaders, not just Moses, but a lot of leaders, who cheer when a hurricane goes through an evil city, who think it's awesome when floods roll through somewhere, and they're like, see, that's because of the sin that was in the camp. I don't think so, but this is where they get that stuff. This is where they pick it up. So I think Moses looks around and he goes, hey, no, I'm not done with this battle. And then after they kill all these people, then he's like, all right, now you need to purify yourselves. And he goes through all of that ritual. And I lost myself in the notes. Oh, I wanted to pull this out. I'm sorry. Let me read the verse to you. All the spoils are, which chapter 31? Okay, yeah, verse 8. Among their victims, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, Reba, and the 5 kings of Midian. This is the part I want to get to. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. So Balaam was evidently in Midian, and many believe that he was there collecting another payment that was owed to him because the plan worked. That there was some sort of financial arrangement, and when he heard through the grapevine, remember he's all the way over at the Euphrates River where he lives, he hears that Moses is going to attack Midian. He hopped on his donkey and rode there as fast as he could to grab his final payment and get back home with it. But he didn't make it. He didn't get out in time, so he was killed. So anyways, yeah. So after purification, things were boiled, things were fired, things were soaked, things were, everybody, 7 days, the army is clean, inventory is taken, all the bounty is given out, and the entire nation is now enriched by the death and genocide of another nation. And this is where sometimes, you know, we get addicted to the results of plans that God really had nothing to do with. We look at what's going on around us and we say, this must be the hand of God because we're all rich, or we're at least making money, or the church increased my benefits, or whatever. And I think I have to speak from somebody who was in ministry. I would love to get back into ministry, but I was in ministry for almost 40 years. I know that kind of addiction where you look around and you say, okay, attendance equals God's blessing. Baptisms equal God moving amongst us. Salvation equals God's moving amongst us. The number of youth we have in our ministry equals God's blessing on the church. Like there's so many things where you look at and you say, this equals that. But I don't believe that to be true anymore. And I think Moses looks at the victory and says, see, God, that was God's plan. And remember, Moses is writing this as memory. He's like, that had to be God's plan because it worked. We wiped out everyone and we were all enriched. I don't think that was God's plan. I don't think his plan is ever to kill. And you know, well, you'd say, well, what would happen? Well, I don't know. Maybe have a conversation with Midian. Maybe try to work out a contract. Maybe continue to train your people not to mix with the Midianites. Maybe continue to make the plan of God known that, listen, we are going to live our lives so focused on God that God will draw all men to him. They're going to see our kindness to one another. They're going to see our commitment to family. They're going to see our love for God. And they're going to say, look at the blessings that are poured out on that nation. We should behave just like them. We should find out more about their God. They're going to look at a family and say, man, they love each other. They're going to look at a family and say, wow, look at how they navigate difficult circumstances. Look how they continually find each other and support one another. Man, we got to make our family just like them. What does it take? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your God. And then the enemy takes that thought and he starts to bring in lies, subtle lies, sweet little lies. And it starts to deteriorate the culture of the kingdom of God. And you end up in a place where you're saying, hey, you know what would be great is if that group of people died. It'd be great if that cultural belief, if anybody who believes that, it'd be great if they were all like, I don't know, put in jail, put in an institution, if they were all reprogrammed to think right rather than focusing on God and focusing on loving one another and letting our kindness draw people to repentance. All right, that's it for this week on the Epic Narrative. I'll see you again next week, and we will continue this season on the Epic Narrative Podcast.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
Hey, welcome back to my thoughts. They are many and varied, without a doubt. I hope you understood the subtle difference between an oath and a vow. It's I think it just helps sometimes bring clarity, to understand what people mean when they say stuff. I've said it before, how important those definitions are. I talked about many times in even in husband and wife relationships, you say one thing and you assume your spouse knows what you mean, but they don't, because they have something else in mind. And I often will use things like temperature, like, hey, it's too cold. I think it's cold. Do you think it's cold? How warm do you want it? Like, what do you mean by cold? What do you mean by warm? What do you mean by on time? What do you mean? What do you mean by I'm going to make something sweet? Trust me, my wife she makes wonderful desserts. She really does. But when I make something, if I'm going to make it sweet, like you will have teeth falling out of your. I make it really sweet, and so it's often when I'm making a drink or whatever, people will be like, well, is dad making it or is mom making it? My wife would be like, no, I want you to make me that, but make it the way I would make it, that sort of thing. Anyways, so definitions are important. I hope you enjoyed that difference, the subtle difference between those two things. And again, I know if it's your first time listening, you might be uncomfortable with the idea that I think Moses is kind of throwing things into the mix at this point, that he knows or he believes that the people that he's writing to at the time need more refinement and need more help understanding. And so he's writing these things down so that hopefully they won't fall away. They won't go, down the path of that isn't the kingdom of God. Anyways, now another thought that I had this week in interacting with somebody that I know and love, we were just kind of discussing. No, it wasn't my wife. Bob's like, was that your wife? No. I love somebody else too. Yes, one of my children. Thank you very much. Okay, let's just leave it at that. My goodness. They were talking about how internally they have, as they're growing and learning, which we all should do until the day we die, they're learning that often when the Lord's called them to do something, for family or for friends or at the church, it's like the initial yes in their head, it means, okay, now I have to do everything. Like it now becomes in essence a burden, and that is not what God calls. He doesn't call you into something so that something becomes a burden. He calls you to do something because of the joy that it can bring you, and the joy and love and peace and hope that you'll communicate because of the kingdom of God that you carry within you. So when if somebody asks you to, will you lead in worship? Now, if the enemy can, he'll turn that into a burden. He'll turn that into a drudgery. Like, yes, the Lord opened up the door. Yes, I say yes to God. Now I have to do it. Now it becomes, and I'm not saying that saying yes, everything is easy. I'm not saying it's not work. Yes, there's work involved, but there's that subtle difference between being burdened by what the Lord's asked you to do and just the normal work that it takes to do what to accomplish something that the Lord might have asked you to do. So, understand that subtle difference. And when something becomes overwhelming, or you're like, okay, I'm just going to sacrifice myself until I die, and only Christ is there. That whatever the religion will tell you to do. I must die to self. Woe is me. Be really careful that behavior doesn't become a shift out of the kingdom of God. When that behavior, whatever it is you're being asked to do, when that behavior is not a place of joy and hope and peace and love and freedom, then you have to question it. You have to go back to it and say, all right, then what is going on here? And this person whom I love, they were just saying that they understand that subtlety now, and now when they say say yes to something, even if the thing is inconvenient, they don't allow it to become a burden, which is awesome. I'm sorry, I got something going on in my throat right now. All right, well, I guess that's it. I guess my thoughts are over. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.